Welcome to Starting with IEP. I am Flor de Amelia, and this is episode number 17. It is part 2 of last week's, where we talked about the 101 on transition IEP services and what is DORS. This week, we're continuing the conversation because I felt like I was information dumping you guys, where it was overload. So I am so sorry if it felt that way. But also, if you have questions, feel free to put them on the comment, or you can message me directly so I can further explain certain parts of it. Okay, so we're going to continue the conversation. Are you guys ready? Because I feel like this is more information coming your way, but I do want to share this is all very helpful. How we're going to continue on the conversation is explaining how DORS/VR, how it should show up in the transition IEP. And I want to say that a lot of our families, what I've noticed is that unfortunately, families usually do miss this type of connection. So this part of the segment is actually very crucial for you guys. So when is realistically the earliest time to connect with DORS? So in Maryland, students can definitely begin the Pre-ETS program, which is the pre-employment transition services, at the age of 14. A lot of the families, when I have spoken to them, the things that they have told me is that the reasons why they don't want to access it right now is because they're a child, they're a young adult, they're a teenager. They feel that they're not ready because they feel like they need a one-to-one, or they just need more support. They're like, oh, who's going to do the drop off to this job? This is a huge commitment on their part, and I completely understand. But also, I just really do encourage for families that please do not wait till senior year, because often the times that's too late. I want to share that with Aliyah. She's 16 right now. We got the approval for DORS, but it does take a while to hear back for the approval and for it to be reviewed. It took us close to a full year for us to actually access the funding. That was a whole different story that we had to advocate as a family and just ask, hey, why hasn't it been approved yet for her to start with this provider? Even though she was already approved for the services, but then it gets released to a DORS service provider for them to use the funds. So that was another headache. But yay, we got it done. And I want to say, we learned so much from that experience, Aliyah. In the last episode, I was explaining, and we're close to being done with this experience. We actually have been trying to fade us out. We wanted to see how much assistance she has one-to-one, but I wanted to see, because it involves so much repetition and she understands the routine. She loves the routine. So we were slowly trying to fade out. But we noticed that she needs much more like visual prompts. We noticed in what situation or scenarios she needs more support in problem solving. For example, there are some pants, the pants that are really stretchy, she can put them in the hangers really easily. But if they're jeans and they're thick, she really has to squeeze onto those clips, and then for her to put those leggings on. They're not leggings, the jeans on. Unlike the leggings, super easy because they're super thin. But when she's stuck there, she's not asking for help or assistance, or she can problem solve and be like, this is my hard load. Let me put a difficult pile over here and not get stuck on that. And I can continue on with the leggings or the other fabrics that she can't easily hang up on. So we have to help her problem solve with that, so the type of work that she's doing doesn't get disrupted, so it can flow better. That's something that we noticed. So I was talking to her DORS coordinator today, actually, and I was telling him that this experience, it's been eye-opening, actually. Last week, I told you guys that I felt so bad that I underestimated Aliyah. And I feel so bad underestimating her potential, because me and my husband, I remember saying, Sean, when she graduates, when she is done with school, I want Aliyah I want her to have a part-time job, at least 5 hours. Someone please give my daughter a 5-hour part-time position that she can keep doing every week, because I want her to get out of the house. I want her to feel like she has a job. This experience, my daughter's working 5 hours straight, really dedicated with her job, really wanting to finish those bins. My expectation completely changed. I was thinking that if anyone can give her a 5-hour job, now it's no. At a very minimum, someone better give her a 20-hour position, or I will make that position for her. I even joked to Sean, I was like, you know what? We're going to be purchasing that business here in 3 years. And I know a lot of you are probably, man, you're crazy. You're probably guys thinking, okay, that's too much. But meet another special needs mom. Like, a lot of us, when we find something that works for our child, we want to hold on to it. And for me, that place is very much a possibility. It makes me so happy, because then I don't have to worry about Aliyah just laying in bed or not A lot of us can say, yes, I would love to lay in bed and just lay and not do anything. But then there gets to a part where if you do that too much, it can really affect your mental health. And that's something that I want to make sure that Aliyah has structure. She feels she has purpose. And I just want to make sure that she leads a happy and meaningful life if she wants to do that type of work. So I was telling our DORS coordinator how happy this changed definitely how I see her potential. I know Aliyah is really happy. I know Aliyah is really happy doing her job. I'm happy that we found something that she really does like. Also, something that I feel that I have to share with you guys is there was something magical that happened. So Bruce is 14-year-old. She's 16. So she is the oldest, but in so many different occasions and different events, all of us has always seen Bruce as the older brother, even though he's the younger brother. I remember when Aliyah was starting off her job and I picked up Bruce from school and then he's like, where are we going? I was like, we're picking up Aliyah from her job. He's like, seriously, what? And I'm like, yeah, she has a job. He's like, wait, how much is she getting paid? I was like, $17.25 an hour. That's how much they're paying her. And he was seriously... And he was so proud. He's like, I want to see her. I want to see her at her job. So it was that time that he has seen his sister as a big sister. There was another time because actually Aliyah, this happened 5 years ago. Aliyah actually throws better basketballs than him. Now he's actually doing much, much better. He can touch the rim and he can hang on it. Because that's something that we typically play around with. Aliyah's a better basketball player than you. But he's doing better now. But it was that moment that I realized that Bruce was, I know he's proud of her, but it was that moment that I saw him seeing her as the big sister. And another precious moment was everyone was like, where's Aliyah? Because she's coming home later because of her job. They're like, where's Aliyah? Where's Aliyah? Where does she go? Is she at school? And I was like, no, she's at work. The 6-year-old, she's at work? What is she doing? I was like, she's hanging up clothes. She's categorizing the clothes. She's sorting the clothes, sorting the hangers. And then Aliyah comes home and she's just laying down on her phone. And then the 3-year-old sister was like, you must be tired. You went to work. She's almost 4. And that was another precious time that I'm seeing her siblings see her as the older sister. She's the one that has the job. And then in the car, I was telling Bruce, oh my goodness, in 8 months, I'm going to be saying Aliyah has 1 more year to be an adult. I'm going to have an adult daughter. That is crazy. That is so crazy. I just remember last year when we were going to the special needs fairs when she was 6. Times really do fly really quickly. I'm sharing all of this because I hope that this helps you when you're putting your cons and your pros together and seeing like, should I make this sacrifice in doing that? I understand because it has been a sacrifice for us to change our schedule around hers to make sure that we have a one-to-one person assigned to her. I do understand that this is a lot to ask from families, but hopefully this also helps you guys see that there are pluses. For me, it's very important that Aliyah's siblings see her as the older sibling, not, oh, pobrecita. That means, oh, poor Aliyah. No. Strong Aliyah. I have a strong sister. That's what I want to see for my kids, her younger siblings of their big sister. So again, I encourage for families, please do not wait until senior year because oftentimes that is too late. Also, if they do graduate on their senior year, I get really nervous because then, remember I told you, I know right now what I need to work on with Aliyah is how to fade us out, how to fade out the one-to-one support. But that's because we did it this year. And I know next year what to work on. So if they work this on their senior year, how do they know what to work on the following year? Especially if this is their senior year, that means they're graduating, which means this is their last year and they're not going to have school support. So if you wait for this, how can the school in their transition IEP, how can they support you? So that's something that you guys have to think about. Always definitely do your pros and your cons and weigh them out. So the ideal window that you should be connecting with DORS is the ages between 14 and 16, because at that time, the student is still building those foundational skills. And I also do want to say that having the opportunity of accessing this at a very early time, it allows your child to practice skills over time instead of just rushing everything at the last year. Remember I said my daughter's going to work on this when she's 16, again when she's 17, because I don't want to freak out on her very last year, because some students, they graduate at 21. I know Aliyah's going to be graduating at 21, but I want to know what I need to fix right now or what I need to work on with her. One of the things that I was telling our DORS coordinator was that we noticed that there was a lot of verbal prompting. So we put a lot of visual prompts. Everything that we noticed that Aliyah needed support, we planned ahead for to make the session or her work environment easier and for her to stay on task and allow for her to also be a team player there, and they can see her as an employee like everyone else. I have worked with families that they have a junior or a senior and then they decide to call DORS. But then they're completely, I want to say shocked would be a way to describe, but they're also very angry because they get so frustrated that there is a process because they have to apply, which takes time. And then there's like the eligibility process, which also takes time. And then there's the planning process, which again takes additional time, and they're all separate. But then you have another student who is definitely connected as early as 14 and they already have that job exposure, and then they have the opportunity to have these soft skills training, which allows them to have a clearer path how to move forward. So I hope this helps you guys. Also, what I want to talk about is what does it look like to have a VR counselor at the IEP table? So I want to say it's very helpful. There's so many reasons that I would invite a VR counselor, especially if you have a good relationship with them. So for families that are really anxious, they're feeling really anxious to go to these IEP meetings and they don't want to go alone, go with your VR counselor. That way you don't feel you're on your own. But if you do decide to have them, because then you won't be on your own, you feel like you have someone that has been listening to you and has seen the vision that you have for your child. They can help translate the school goals into employment outcomes. So that's something that's very beneficial from having them there. Also, they can help with so many questions. What kinds of jobs might realistically fit my students? They can help you vision or plan out or give examples because, again, this is their job. They would know different examples. I think the key word here is realistically. What will realistically fit? Not something that we want for our child or a child wants for themselves. They would help us and the student understand what is realistic here to work and what skills need to be strengthened before they exit out of the school program. They can also explain things like what VR can and cannot fund. How long is the eligibility decision? What services continue after high school? And they can also help ensure that the IEP isn't just compliance, but also purposeful. So I think this is very, 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 very important right now, what I just said. Please, I'm going to repeat it. So the VR counselor, they know so many IEPs look beautiful. But what's the whole point if the IEP is beautiful if it's not even implemented, right? It's just written, but it's not implemented. So they will help to make sure that it's very purposeful. So I'm going to give you an example. Instead of an IEP saying student will improve communication skills, the VR counselor may say, let's focus on the workplace communication, asking for help, following supervisor's instructions, handling feedback. Now that goal has more of a real life meaning instead of just saying the student will improve in communication skills. I think the details here are very important, and especially if you're working on a goal. It's very important for everyone to be clear on what type of communication skills they need to focus on. Now, you guys might be asking, how do I get both the school and the VR team to communicate with each other? So definitely what we need to do is we need to give them consent, right? So you're asking maybe what type of consent or release are needed for the school and the DORS or VR team to coordinate with each other. So the parents must sign a release of information. It is also called ROI to allow the communication between the school and DORS or VR to occur. But not just DORS or VR, but also other agencies as well. Because without this consent, DORS or VR cannot attend the IEP meetings. They also cannot review any evaluations, and agencies cannot coordinate with services. So it's important for you to definitely sign off that ROI. Maybe you're asking, okay, but what specifically are we signing off for them to have access? So definitely access to evaluations, IEPs, transition plans, and a service recommendation. Something that I just want to bring to light is that if agencies aren't talking to each other, it's usually not because they don't want to talk to each other, but most likely it's because paperwork hasn't been signed. I've often seen this and parents get so frustrated. I'm like, that's why you have to sign this off so they have permission to communicate with each other. So you're probably asking what kinds of IEP goals naturally align with DORS VR services. So this is definitely where families can strengthen the IEP so it supports adult outcomes. An example of a goal would be the student will identify their disability-related needs and request accommodation in a workplace role play. And then you're probably asking, but why does VR care? Why would DORS or VR care about this type of goal? It's because employers, they really need to know from their employees, and they need their employees to be able to communicate their needs appropriately. And the key word here is appropriately, not when they're overstimulated at the workplace and then they have a huge tantrum there. They need to appropriately from the beginning say, okay, I need this, or it's too loud, I need headphones, or there's too many people here, I get overwhelmed, can I please be in the back room and do this? It's something that they need to get really comfortable. If it's not verbally, they can definitely type in an email, or they have to also find what is the best form that you feel comfortable communicating. That's something that we're going to find out, but we can only find out if we talk about it, if we work towards that goal. A goal example would be student will follow a multi-step work instruction with visual supports in the community setting. So when you take this goal, you would see why VR cares. And VR cares is because the community setting, that focus and to help the students with their job placement if they work in different community settings. And then the skill itself about taking a multi-step work instruction, that's exactly what they need when their job coach tells them, hey, I need you to focus on this and that. They can cross out, okay, I did X, check. I did Y, check. I did Z, check. I completed it. But they need to know when they're done, know which one is missing. Oh, I actually didn't finish Z, so I'm actually not done with work. But they need to start preparing for this type of work or for this type of setting. They need to start preparing for that type of instruction. Now, what if we're working on travel training and community navigation? An example goal for that would be student will safely navigate public transportation or community routes to the work site. The reason why DORS or VR, the reason why they care so much is because transportation is often one of the biggest barriers to employment, because most of the time they're unable to drive or their parent can't take them to work. So they need to understand how to take the metro, how to take the bus, the train. They need to find out, okay, if I miss the train, I need to problem solve. How do I get to the next train? How do I read this? Things happen and they just need to learn how to problem solve when those barriers of transportation do come up. Another one would be for independent and daily living skills. An example goal will be that students will manage a basic work schedule, personal hygiene, and time management. Now, let's just think about it in a perspective of DORS and VR and why would they care? So employment, if you think about it, the success in being employed, it often depends on consistency and independence. So if they understand how to read their work schedule, also about personal hygiene, how they are being presented, especially if they work with coworkers, we want to make sure that they do develop a good relationship with their coworkers. And also if their customers are coming in, we want to make sure that they can work on their personal hygiene so they are very welcoming to the customers at their job site. And time management is always a great skill to have in order to work towards your independence. So the next thing that I do want to talk about is we need to talk about the difference between entitlement and eligibility and why the difference there matters. So for IDEA, it's a school service. IDEA is an entitlement. So if your child qualifies, the services are guaranteed up until they graduate high school. But VR, DORS, DDA, that is all eligibility based. The families must apply. So again, IDEA, it's an entitlement. So if your child qualifies, it's guaranteed. But VR and DDA, DORS, it's all eligibility based. So the families have to apply, and not everyone qualifies. Services are definitely individualized and not automatic. The key takeaway for families here is that schools, they will not hand off services to adult agencies. That's something that if you, as their parents, their guardians, do not apply for, if you guys do not plan or are unable to advocate, there can be a gap. And that gap often shows up right after graduation. So a lot of the times, if you guys can, and if it's suitable, I would say try. It just depends on every case. It just depends on every case. But a lot of the things that I hear is that parents are struggling right after they graduate 18. Now, a lot of the times, like, oh no, my senior wants to graduate with the rest of his senior friends. But what I keep on hearing now from a lot of families is, I wish I would have held him a little bit long, a little bit sooner, because at home he's not doing anything. A lot of mental health crisis over there because he's isolated, not with friends, no structure, until the DDA adult services programs, they kick in after 21. So from 18 to 21, there's a huge gap there that no one really talks about. It depends for each client. It depends for each student, what is appropriate for them. But please know that you guys can talk to schools to see about, let's not graduate. Let's not have him graduate 18. And these are the reasons X, Y, and Z. Is it possible that we can push graduation to be a little bit longer? Now, that's a discussion that you guys can start as early as 14 years old to start talking about. What will graduation look like? Is it appropriate for my freshman to graduate at 18? Or can we make school easier and make it less hours in a day here? Like, an IEP is all individualized, right? Just because you haven't heard it before ever done for one student doesn't mean it can't be for your child, because again, it has to be individualized. What works for your child? Okay, I really want to recap this because every year I have a good chunk of families really struggling because their child, their student, their young adult has graduated at 18 and they don't know what to do with their child. Something that I want to recap is these timelines. Right? I want you guys to understand these timelines. The offer for the school services, they typically end at 21 years old. Again, this is all state dependent. VR and the Pre-ETS programs, they can begin as early as 14 years old. And DDA, transitioning youth application, can begin 1 to 2 years before school, before your child graduates from school. Remember I told you that Aliyah, at a very young age, she already finished her DDA. She's 16, but she's been on the waiting list for years now. She's already been pre-approved. She's placed on hold, basically. It's something that I don't have to worry about, and we did at a very young age. I want to share that you can actually access DDA much earlier. In the episode when we spoke to Dr. Sylvie, she was able to access DDA services when her daughter was 16 because they were on crisis mode. There was no other waiver out there that they could have accessed earlier, like the autism waiver. So they were on a crisis mode. So they granted her DDA service before 21 years old. There's different reasons why they would put you on the crisis. They would grant DDA much earlier. So please check with your DDA coordinator and see if you guys, the parents, you parents feel that your child is on crisis mode and you want your child to be granted DDA services earlier. Please reach out to them and see if they can help you make a case out of it for you guys to be granted DDA services much earlier than that. Please know that the DORS/VR eligibility decisions and service planning, both of them take time. And the application itself takes time. So if you try to do this senior year, it's just going to be difficult for you to actually try to get the transition IEP to also support these. So it's much better if you start, at least apply for it between the 14 and 16 years old. So that way you have enough time when you really want to use the services. What I want you to take out of this is the transition planning. Just know it's all about timing. The application process is long. So please don't determine this, oh, I'm going to do this when he's a senior or a junior. Please just take this more as it's going to take a lot of time. So let me just apply for this much earlier so then I'm set. I'm good. When there are a junior and senior, they already applied, they already been screened, they already been approved. So we just want to make sure that it's a smooth process. I think over here, I'm really trying to emphasize we want this to be a smooth process, not just for your child, but also for you, because you're going to be the one taking those phone calls, reading those emails, following up, ensuring, like me, because I had this problem. It already got approved, but I have to ensure that it's going through for the DORS providers now, because even though I got approval, the funds didn't get released. So that's something that we had to advocate for. Okay, that was segment number 3. Let's move on to segment number 4, which we talk about advocacy questions parents can bring during the meetings. I think the segment is important because definitely what I want you guys to feel is empowered When you walk into those meetings, I want you guys to feel confident, and I do not want you guys to feel intimidated. So some of the questions that you can ask your school and IEP team is, at what age does our district start formal transition planning? I think this is important because it helps parents ensure that the district is following state law and not delaying it. Kind of like plants a seed to them, right? Oh, they start at 14. My child's 16. How come we haven't really talked about this? Another question that you could ask is, where is this reflected in my child's IEP? So this whole transition planning, it must be written. It shouldn't just be talked about. This is how you're going to be securing and making sure that things are being followed through. Another question is, what are my child's post-secondary goals? And please make sure that these goals are measurable. They're based on assessments. You can definitely ask what type of assessments did you guys do? And that, of course, they're updated regularly. Another question that you can ask is, who is our transition coordinator? Every school should have someone overseeing transition services. I would definitely make a one-to-one appointment with them, see what the school has been doing as a whole. And they'll tell you different programs. And then you can be like, oh, my child likes X, Y, and Z. I heard you say about this program. How can my child get into that program? How can they get into that part of what you just said? And they would give you ideas how to do. And also they would know, oh, mom wants her child to work on this and that, and they'll take a note to that as well. Another question is, how are we teaching self-advocacy? So the things that our students need to practice is definitely speaking up, making choices, and understanding their supports. Because when they speak up about what accommodations they need to do, and if the employer gives them choices, okay, the noise bothers you. Do you want a headphone, or do you want something to block off the noise and the noise cancellation headphones, or would you like to work here? They need to make a choice. They need to be like, actually, I don't want to work in an isolated area because I actually do enjoy seeing the customers come in. Can I work in this spot instead? So that way they feel like they're being heard and that they're making their own choices. It just depends on the student. But sometimes students, they feel overwhelmed even by two choices. So that's something that we need to help them. But sometimes they make a choice, but it's often the first choice, but they have difficulty really comparing the two choices and what's most beneficial for them. Sometimes they get overwhelmed and they just pick the first choice without realizing, because you may know them best, they'd be like, actually, the second one was better for you. But that's something that they just need to practice on, really listening to those choices. Another question that you can ask is, what real work experience are available for my child or for my students? And I just want to make sure that it shouldn't just be classroom simulations. Some examples are job sampling or community-based instructions or internships or volunteer placement. That's something that the school should definitely be helping you have access to. Now I'm going to change a little bit, and I'm going to give you some questions that you can ask your DORS or VR provider. What pre-ETS services can my child access now? Some examples are like the job explorations, the workplace readiness, the work-based learning, the self-advocacy instructions. So those are some, and then they can go into more detail. And they can also tell you, hey, this, for example, the self-advocacy instruction, in order for Aliyah to access that, there needed to be a lot of modifications towards that. So they would tell us different providers that give that program. They would tell us, for your child specifically, they would work best in this organization because they do really well breaking things down and making it more individualized and more visuals. So that's something really great for them to share when you ask those VR. But I noticed with our DORS coordinator, I asked them which one does best for a student that is high support needs. And then he was able to tell me which provider works best with them. For me, it's really important for that because definitely I need someone that thinks out of the box. Another question that you could ask them is, what does the eligibility process look like? So when you first have that conversation with them, you can definitely ask them that question. For example, what documentation is needed in order for it to be complete? How long does it take? And what determines the eligibility? Another question that you guys can ask is, when should we apply for the full VR services? Often they're going to tell you before exit, but not after graduation. Actually, with us, we did everything. We did DORS and then we did VR. We did it together. I was like, I'm already doing the process. Why have this phone call again? They already have the application. They can just put it together. And I'm already talking to someone. We're like, okay, done. Okay, now let's go do the VR. Done. I feel so relieved because I did two things at once. I just got it done. So that was just my suggestion. But if you are on a time crunch, I completely understand that you just want to do one at a time. Another question that you can ask to your DORS provider or VR provider is, what job experience have you supported for similar students? And this will definitely help. This is what our DORS coordinator actually did for us. They helped us visualize what other outcomes were, and they were real outcomes, not just theory. For me, it was very hopeful for me because I definitely understood and I heard the different outcomes, and that made me feel like it is possible. Another thing that you could also ask is, can you attend our next IEP meeting? And this is also important because you want to make sure that there is alignment between the school goals and the adult services. They can also read and be like, hey, let's fix this, or let's change this to that. Just having another member in the team and looking at the IEP is so great to have. Another question that you could ask is, how do you collaborate with DDA or Medicaid programs? And the reason why that question is important is because it is very critical for students with significant support needs to have that form of collaboration. We just want to make sure that they are on target to collaborate as a whole. Now, we talked about the questions that parents should ask the IEP team, the questions that the parents should ask DORS, VR, but now we're going to go more into the realms, the questions that the parents should ask themselves. I asked this question before she started her internship and during her internship, and I can't wait to ask these type of questions after her internship. What does a successful day look like for my child at 25 years old? Remember I told you that before I was like, I just want her to have a 5-hour part-time job. Now it's, oh no, right now in mid of her internship, I was like, I want a part-time 20-hour for her. I still do see that she needs one-to-one support, but my goal hopefully by next year is, okay, how much of it would be support? It's just acknowledging the different levels of prompting that she's needing. How much level of support is she needing? Another question that you can ask yourself is, what skills does my child need this year, not someday? And that's really important for you to focus right now, today. What can we work on this year? Because next year, you're going to be growing those skills and making it better and better the following year. Another question is, does my child know how to talk about their strengths, their challenges, and what helps them succeed? And again, all of these are advocacy questions that they need to know for themselves in order to advocate for themselves. And the last question that would be very helpful if you ask yourself is, who should be part of our long-term transition team beyond school? This might cause a little bit more of a homework for you guys, but it's just researching. What providers out there, what agencies are really helping our community? Who really understands our community? There's definitely stories out there, so just communicate with other families what they have seen as green flags or red flags from certain organizations. So you definitely want to have, I guess it's just like if you were to hire a babysitter, you want to have their references, right? You're just not going to let anyone work with your child or be with your child. I want to say it's the similar thing. You just want to make sure that you're scoping out the organization that's going to be helping your students, your child, your young adult, your teenager get to where they need to be. So I think it's just something for you guys to look at or think about. On to our next segment. I do have a few call to actions for this episode. One of the things that, if you haven't done so already, please look up your state's Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. Definitely ask your IEP team where the transition planning is documented. Also, request that the VR to be invited to the table if you haven't invited them already. And please remember that transition is not a single meeting. It is definitely a process. It is definitely part of the IEP. Just that IEP is changing consistently, the transition planning is also changing as well. So we're at the end of our episode. If you guys like this episode, please don't forget to follow, subscribe, share with a friend, write us a comment. And if you guys want me to interview you, oh my goodness, please let us know. So on to next week. Can't wait to see you. We'll chat soon.